You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist, Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Tuesday, May 19th, 2026. And today we're going to cover down on more insider trading related to the Iran war. Also, the President of the United States is doubling down on how little he actually cares about Americans who are struggling in this economy. Foreigners are getting some sweetheart deals for some new houses. Democrats just can't moderate on illegal alien immigration. And also, the Department of Justice really hates the First Amendment. So let's get after it. All right, guys, cards on the table. I have to jet out today. So today's episode might be a little bit on the short end because I will tonight be on the Timcast IRL podcast. So I'm going to fly up to an undisclosed location in West Virginia, be on the show. I think we go to air at 8 o'clock Eastern if everybody wants to catch it there. And then I'll have to fly back the following day. So I'm probably going to miss tomorrow's episode. So there will be no Wednesday episode of the American Radicals Podcast. But I'm here with you now, and we're going to churn and burn through a bunch of different stories today because I'd like to bring you things that might have eluded your attention, things that are just as important as the top 2 or 3 things that every single media source, influencer, podcaster covers down on. We like to go with a little bit of the deeper pulls. And the first one I want to get to is an issue that we've talked about multiple times, but it's just still rearing his nasty head, and it's actually caught the attention of some of the mainstream media out there. This is on 60 Minutes, and it relates to insider trading related to Polymarket, which is one of these futures sites. It's not gambling, it's technically futures, but essentially it functions the same way. Polymarket exists. It's not an American enterprise. It's offshore, but you can log in, you can use a VPN, so you can hide that you are from America, and you can essentially bet on outcomes. Now, it could be things that are innocuous. Who's going to win the Grammy tonight? It could be something a little bit related to politics. Who's going to win the primary that's happening today in Kentucky? Or it could be related to national security. When is the United States going to drop a bomb on Cuba? All of these sorts of prop bets that are there, you can make, and you can wager your own dollars. Now, some people like to argue that people bet with their dollars more than they do with polling. Polling is ripe for abuse. People won't answer the phone when it rings. It's related to landline phones, so it skews towards an older demographic, people who actually still do have landline phones. And people like to mess with the pollsters. They won't necessarily give their honest opinion. But when it comes to the opportunity to earn money, well, then people are going to be a lot more honest. So maybe these Polymarket sorts of websites that are out there, they might offer a better glimpse into what the actual pulse of the populations are, particularly in America, related to politics or national security. So this is the age that we live in. But as we come to find out, there's insider trading involved because you're not supposed to, but people use Polymarket and they might have some inside knowledge. So 60 Minutes went forward and talked to this watchdog group, and they came out with a pretty startling revelation. We'll give this a play.
This might be the most insane pattern we have found on Polymarket so far.
Based in Paris, Nicholas Weiman's small data analytics firm Bubble Maps creates visualizations of bets on Polymarket to spot bubbles or clusters of suspect traders. One paradox of Polymarket, everything about the trades is totally transparent and public, except the traders themselves remain anonymous.
This big cluster in the middle, no one talked about it.
The firm's head of investigations goes by his online handle, Deebs. He asked us to obscure his identity over fears of retaliation for his detective work. They shared for the first time what they believe is a more egregious insider trading case than Gannon Ken Van Dyke's.
We spotted 9 Polymarket accounts, all connected, who made collectively $2.4 million, betting almost exclusively on US military operations. Van Dyke made 400,000, here 2.4 million. And now here's the crazy part. 98% win rate.
Wait. 98.
98%.
This is like winning the lottery multiple times, you know?
The linked accounts made dozens of winning bets on the specific dates of pivotal moments in the war with Iran, even when the odds were low. The first U.S. strikes, the removal of Iran's supreme leader, the announcement of a ceasefire.
How do we know this isn't just someone who has really good instincts?
Luck alone cannot explain those numbers.
If you know this, why don't federal prosecutors?
Well, hopefully with your interview, they're going to know this.
Now, they alluded to Van Dyke. Van Dyke was the one guy so far who's been charged with using Polymarket. It was a military personnel who had some inside information, used a third party to open up a Polymarket account and bet, essentially, or predict what was going to happen, and wound up making about $400,000. Now, what this French company was able to do, because Polymarket is all open source, it's all there for an investigator to look at, but who's really interested from the government in investigating the government, particularly if people within the government are making lots of money. But what this company has actually done is show that there's a far bigger fraud related to some connected accounts. So in a joining piece from CBS News on this very issue, headline, suspected insider accounts net $2.4 million in Polymarket Iran war bets with 98% win rate, according to this firm. So it was 80 bets. They won 98% of the time, so I guess one they got off. The anonymous accounts made those bets on specific dates of pivotal moments related to when the United States was going to do some strikes, the removal of the supreme leader, and the announcement of the ceasefire. Now, here wasn't touched on in that 60 Minutes piece. More than $1 billion has been staked online related to military decisions and outcomes. And it's kind of ugly sometimes. Now, Israel had another service member who was charged with doing the exact same thing that the Van Dyke character did. But then there was this journalist, if you recall, we talked about it, I don't know, probably like a month ago. There was a journalist who was reporting on what was going on in Israel and said, hey, some bombs fell down, and then got some threats because there was a whole discrepancy of, well, did they actually fall within the city limits, or did they land in a wooded area? Because there was almost $1 million on the line about a particular prediction. And this guy, this journalist, was just kind of doing his job, said, they gave me death threats. They wanted me to issue a retraction and say, well, you know, it didn't fall in the city, it fell outside it, because there was going to be a huge swing of money that went one way or another. Now, the United States prohibits not just using Polymarket for political stuff, but prohibits betting on national security matters. Military bets on the platform are not allowed, but there's a workaround. If you have a VPN for $2 a month, you can kind of do that. And then they start talking in the CBS piece about another issue that's not this particular line of events that relates to the announcement of the ceasefire, or when the bombings were happening, or deposing the leadership in Iran, but it's related actually to the price of oil. So again, from CBS News, suspected insider accounts net $2.4 million, and they are actually winning at a 98% consistency. This goes back to, almost 2 months ago, in the first couple of weeks of the kinetic operation, definitely not a war. Don't you dare call me a stewardess. I'm a flight progress coordinator in Iran. So March 23rd, more than $800 million was staked out on the chance that oil prices were going to drop. Now, there was no reason to believe that. It was actually, according to the report in CBS News, a pretty quiet trading day on oil futures. Now, this wasn't Polymarket, but it's the exact same thing, insider information, because 15 minutes after this, Donald Trump posted on his social media account on True Social that the White House and Iran had a very good, productive conversations and wanted to end hostilities. And then all of a sudden, oil prices, because it looked like, wow, we're not going to have ongoing kinetic operation anymore, so oil's probably going to come down. Then the future prediction of where oil was going to be came down. It came down like $800 million. So this person or came down and makes a 10% profit on that because of the prediction that was there. And did this person happen to know that the president was going to post something onto Truth Social? I mean, it could be serendipitous, coincidental, but 15 minutes at 6:50 a.m. I mean, just kind of like playing around and gambling on oil futures at that hour. That's kind of an odd coincidence. This person or this account winds up netting somewhere in the area of $80 million. Now, a second piece from CBS News also on this one, because the administration, the Trump administration, part two, is trying to push back on this. This was reporting back in April because these allegations have been out there for now a couple of months. Headline here, White House staff received email warning them not to place bets on the prediction markets. This email that went around said, quote, criminal offense for anyone to use non-public information to buy or sell these contracts, and government ethics regulations prohibit the use of non-public government information for private benefit of an employee or any third party. Well, what's the fallout? I mean, we can send a strongly worded email, essentially. That's what they did here. Are you actually going to take this up? Are you actually going to investigate and charge? Now, they got the one guy from Van Dyke. Now, this independent third-party firm from France has identified 9 different accounts that made over $2 million, basically looking like they took insider information and wagered it onto these futures bets. Now, federal investigators are doing, as CBS says, a probe, which isn't a thing. The term probe is troublesome. I think it implies that the government is going to do something, but that's not an actual law enforcement tool. I mean, there's no question about, well, what's our predication to open up this probe? Is there an information or an allegation about criminal activity? So open up the probe. No, it just kind of sounds slick. It's only a few letters. It implies that we're going to do something about it. But unless you hear that they've opened a full investigation, I don't think we're going to hear anything back. Now, if the market watchers can spot these irregular trades, as they told the 60 Minutes interviewer, there's no reason why the government can't do it. And ultimately, it comes down to just a question of willpower. Do we exist in a time where there's a two-tiered system of justice? This is maybe a second bite of the apple for the Trump administration. I mean, the Epstein administration, but potatoes, because when the Trump administration shut down the Epstein investigation in July of 2025, it was sort of a punt on the ultimate question on Epstein. I mean, do you need to know the people on the list? Would it radically alter your life very much if you knew everybody's name who was on the list? I mean, it would make you feel really good to know that they had been exposed, but if there was no sort of follow through on that, no accountability, would you just kind of be like, well, there's public shaming, but that's about it? Like, that's not good enough. How much would your life be changed? Not very much. But what did Epstein really represent? It was an ultimate question. Do we have a two-tiered system of justice where people who have the access, who have the contacts, the elites, are they able to engage in activity where they can abuse small children? Can they be an elite pedophile rapist and get away with it just because of who they are? Do we have a two-tiered system of justice? And when the Trump administration shut down that case and said, look, nothing to see here, and we're going to move on, and we don't want to talk about it anymore until a guy like Thomas Massie comes forward and says, we're going to make you talk about it, and then the administration tries to run him out of office. Again, if you're in Kentucky today, don't forget to go vote. Well, it was a punt. It was a punt on that ultimate question. Here's another question. Having inside access, you know when the warheads are going to drop on the foreheads, and you personally enrich yourself. That's no different. You're an elitist. I don't care what you're pulling down, what your GS pay rate is. You're an elitist. You have elite access to the opportunity, and you're abusing your opportunity in contravention to our laws. If I did that, if I had that insider information, I'd be Martha Stewart. I'd be in a jail cell and wearing an orange jumpsuit. Where's the accountability? It's an ultimate question to the leaders, to the very tippy top of our executive branch, which is responsible for law enforcement matters. Questions of, are we addressing fraud and force perpetrated against Americans? In the ultimate question rests at the top. Donald Trump, you're the ultimate insider. We talked about it, what was it, yesterday? He's making stock trades based on what he's doing, so maybe his hands aren't necessarily the most clean. And ultimately, the question then is, does the president care? Does he have his hand on the pulse? He's the ultimate populist. Donald Trump got elected on a wave of populism. He could lick his finger, put it in the air, and detect where the American people were, with the exception of a few things. One being Epstein. But this one is ripe. This one is an opportunity. And is the president hip to that? Does he know what the American people want to see happen? They want to see accountability. And they also want to see other stuff happen, like the promises that were made in 2024. Chief among them being, what about this affordability thing? So let's pivot now, because the president did a sit-down interview. He's spinning right now as we're heading into a midterm election cycle. And I've got a couple clips where I don't think that our president performed very well in front of a relatively sympathetic interviewer. It's Brett Baer over at Fox News. It's definitely the cable news option of choice for the president and for many of his followers. So I've got a couple clips that I want to show, and we want to dissect them. Here's the first one as we're talking about the affordability issues in America, the president of the United States.
Numbers are. You can imagine Democrats and political pundits jumped all over this statement that you made the other day. You were asked when you were leaving.
What extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about American financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all.
That's right. That's a perfect statement.
So,
I'd make it again.
You can imagine how many people stopped the soundbite I don't think about America's financial situation. So what's your response to that framework?
It's very simple. When people hear me say it, everybody agrees. Short-term pain. It's going to be short-term pain. But the pain is much less than people thought. Because
short-term pain, long-term gain. We're going to lean back on that message here. Define short-term for me, sir. We are in May. This has been going on for 2.5 months. I thought it was a matter of days. It was a matter of weeks. Now it's months. What's the next evolution? Oh, that's right. We get to years and then forever wars. But how about the comment of everybody says, everybody agrees, because our president is surrounded by a bunch of sycophants who are issuing the MAGA land acknowledgments all the time. Sir, you're the greatest, you're the smartest, you're the best. And by the way, if I say all these things, then you'll go forward and do the policy preferences that I want, not that the people who voted for you want. But as long as you say nice things to the president, then he's more inclined to bend the knee to the will of what those advisors are saying. And the advisors are clearly saying that it's a good, objectively good thing for the United States to be involved in Iran right now, because the higher priority is stopping the Iranians from getting a nuclear weapon, even though I thought we were supposed to be clear of that because we had Operation Midnight Hammer last year where we bombed them back to the Stone Age without ever touching the ground. And I guess it wasn't that effective, even though it was the most effective and most awesome operation ever because of the people around Donald Trump told him that. But now we're getting into the Iran conflict. And I kind of want to steer clear of that. I want to focus down on the president. The president is not hip to what the American people are feeling. He's very cold. And it reminds me of actual Donald Trump's predecessor, because we were told repeatedly during the Joe Biden Autopen administration just how awesome we had it all the time. It was like they existed in a different universe, very much like the universe that our current president does. So I went back into the archives and I found one piece from the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, and also an adjoining video that I'd like to refresh everybody about the former leader of the free world, one Joseph Robinette Biden, the human Roomba. But the headline first in the Washington Post: falling inflation, rising growth give U.S. the world's best recovery. You guys remember this? Remember they told us that, well, the rest of the world is really suffering because of coronavirus and because of Russia. But we are the skinniest kid at fat camp. We are the smartest retard. We're the tallest midget. We're doing awesome. So from the Washington Post, on Friday, President Biden hailed fresh government data showing that annual inflation over the second half of 2023 fell back to the Federal Reserve's 2% target. coupled with Thursday's news that the economy grew by 3.1% over the past 12 months, the Commerce Department report showed that the United States appears to have achieved an economic soft landing. And this is all about how it's awesome and amazing how much money was spent during the Trump administration, during the final year, during coronavirus, and then into the Biden administration, where we had already gotten out of the lockdown situation where they'd driven a truck through our front yards and then reimbursed us a certain modicum, like, $1,600 of a stimmy check for telling you to stay home and stay safe and shut down your non-essential business that you use to feed your family and pay your mortgage. But we were all good now. And then we had to have the Biden administration take that precedent that the Trump administration part one set and then double down on it and steroid juice it up and start doing the American Rescue Plan and spending billions and billions of dollars. And the Washington Post was uber excited, MAGA Doppler excited about how the Biden administration had stolen money from the American people and then printed trillions of dollars out of thin air, like their predecessor, Trump Part 1, in order to juice up the system. And we'd gotten to this soft landing. We're back down to the inflation rates that the Federal Reserve determines are adequate. The Federal Reserve, which is independent, quasi-independent organization that says it's completely desirable and optimal for the money in your bank account to become worth less every single day. 2% less every single year is what's appropriate and optimal for our economy. So if you put $100 in your bank account and at the end of the year, it's only worth 98, and that's great. That's amazing. Well, that's the argument that was made. And everybody was saying, look, affordability is an issue. We're dealing with this phenomenon in economics called inflation, where the dollars in our bank account do not have the buying power that they had. The numbers that I'm earning on my pay stub might be the same. Heck, they might be even more. I might have gotten a cost of living adjustment. I might have gotten a pay raise, but there is still too much money going into the system. And when I go to the grocery store, when I one time was spending $200 to feed my family for the week, now I got to spend $300 and I'm not earning an extra $100 to make up the difference every single week. We're all feeling it. This was 1A. Maybe it was 1, maybe it was 1A of the issues that went into the 2024 election. The American people voted on inflation / affordability, cost of living stuff. And the Trump campaign to become the Trump administration part 2 was hip to that. They were finger to the pulse. They heard what the people were saying and they were going to do. They pinky swore, they promised, crossed our heart, hope to die, stick a needle in our eye. They were going to do what was necessary. And now they just sound cold. They sound a lot like this guy, because that piece from Washington Post was from January 2024, going into the final year of the Biden administration. They were gearing up for that reelect. Biden hadn't come out yet, right? He hadn't done the debate with Donald Trump where he crapped the bed and everybody said, wow, that's a doddering old fool, even though if you're paid attention at all, you knew it ahead of time. But it was a shocker to millions of Americans. That was at the beginning of the final year of the Biden auto-pen administration. What about at the end, after the election, his farewell address, very much like a George Washington, Joe Biden told us just how awesome that he did.
This morning's job report shows the economy added more than 250,000 jobs in December. That the unemployment rate has dropped below 4.1, as low as 4.1%. And all told, in 4 years, we've created 16.6 million new jobs, the most of any single presidential term in history. We did it by fundamentally changing the economic policy of this country. After decades of trickle-down economics that primarily benefited those at the very top, Kamala and I and our administration have written a new playbook that's growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up that benefits everyone. The new playbook is working. We've created jobs every single month I was in office. During my presidency, we saw the lowest average unemployment rate of any administration in the last 50 years. And battling through the worldwide effects of the pandemic, Putin's war in Ukraine, and supply chain disruption, inflation rate is down to nearly 2%.
2%. There it is. You're losing $2 out of that 100 every single year. They fundamentally reoriented the economy from the top down to the bottom up, redistributing wealth from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. we're going to steal money from some citizens and give it to others. And then we'll ask those others to make sure they vote for us in November. That was the fundamental change, the fundamental transformation that the Biden administration was able to follow up on, that the Obama Part 1, Part 2 from 2009 to 2016 was just unable to get over the hump. But, well, Biden administration pushed it so much further because they embraced the government spending mechanisms. They doubled down and tripled down on what had been done historically and would have been done by both Republicans and Democrats in order to do that. And they were saying, you've never had it better. Don't worry about the cost at the grocery store and how you're looking and searching for that yellow tagged beef, the discount ground beef that you have to buy before it expires tomorrow. Everybody knew that costs were high, that they hadn't come down. They were no better in 2024 than they had been pre-coronavirus. They weren't anywhere close to where they had been in 2016 at the end of the Obama administration. And it was all the fault of the government spending that went on and hurt everybody. But they exist in an ivory tower. They live in Washington, D.C. on perfectly manicured lawns. And if there's a can on the street, then a government employee is paid an exorbitant salary to pick it up and throw it out. So they don't see it. Look, they can be even partially forgiven. I mean, they're communists. They know what they're doing is fundamentally evil, but maybe not Joe Biden so much because he's got a brain full of mush. But you could almost forgive them. They're so surrounded by people who tell them the sweet nothings into their ear all the time of just how amazing and brilliant that they are, that they don't understand what it's like to be a regular person. And I want to go back to our current president, who was asked something different. This is Donald Trump, because he's surrounded, failing to get the pulse of the American people and saying, hey, plebe, why are you complaining so much? The stock market has never been better.
Trump voters. Alex says, I voted for you 3 times. He can't handle the costs. And he's not for this foreign conflict.
I hate it, bro.
He's not for the foreign conflict. But Roy in Pennsylvania, he's a retired farmer. He can't handle the fuel going up. And he says he's
going to come down very fast.
And
well,
so,
no, look, I'm disappointed.
I'm just telling you
when
what
you say to him, Roy, Alex, we got a problem. We just hit the highest stock market price ever. By the way, then, when I went in. Now, again,
it's higher.
With the war, it's higher than it was when I went in. Think of that.
I agree.
The 401ks at their all-time high. There are more people working right now in the United States of America than at any point ever in the history of our country.
Detroit Free Press.
Sounds a lot like our previous president, doesn't it? Stock market's never been better. I mean, I guess that's why we can't prosecute Epstein clients, right? I mean, the Dow's over 50,000. The stock market has never been higher because the dollars that are going into the stock market are worth less than toilet paper. That's why you're investing useless currency into a stock market. So it's artificially being propped up. The number that you see doesn't indicate any sorts of value. And look, maybe you believe what the president's been doing. Your 401k has never been better. How old are you? Are you on the verge of retiring? Because, I mean, maybe if you're watching Fox News, I guess that's basically their audience at this point. But if you're just a middle-class person who's socking some money away whenever they can, trying to save up for those golden years, but right now, those golden years are over the horizon. You still have your working life. Can you go to the grocery store? Can you say, hey, look, my 401k is doing great. And can I have that? Because my net worth has never been higher with these useless dollars that are backing that up. The cashier is going to say, no, I'm going to need to see cash or credit in order to get that yellow tag beef. I mean, really, the value of a 401k, it's part of who you are if you're middle-aged, in that 20 to 60 age range, your working lives. But if you're like me and you're a man and you're 40,
come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
It doesn't play into my daily life that much because what it's kicking out to me in the form of dividends that I'm going to use to live on, it's not relevant for another 20, 25, 30, 35, 45 years at the rate that the economy is going right now. you're probably going to have to work into your 80s in order to keep up and keep that income coming in. And the president is not hip to it. And he's also saying things like there's more people working now than ever. He's not getting accurate information. So let's connect it here to this story from Washington Post. The labor market is stuck. These 7 charts explain why. And I'll put a link to these charts. We're not going to dig too deeply into them. They get really, really nerdy on this stuff, but there's some key points here that I want to highlight. So hiring in the country is stagnant. Labor force is shrinking, and workers who would like to find a new position are nervous to quit their jobs. Right now, there's only 1 job open for every unemployed person, and historically, you want to have lots of jobs for unemployed people. A constant circulation as people are trading up because they're working in one job and they say, hey, I can get paid if I move on doing the same thing for a different company. I want to promote and take more responsibility and have more financial reward for that. So more jobs, more than a 1-to-1 ratio is considered to be more optimal than that, because if companies are hiring, it implies that they're growing, right? The war in Iran is causing energy prices to skyrocket, making it riskier for companies to take on more employees. Higher costs, the number one driver of costs for most companies out there, small businesses, is payroll. It's just the biggest expenditure that you have. So if you're feeling the squeeze because it's harder to turn on your lighting or harder to fill up the fuel in the trucks that you're using, are you going to hire somebody who you're going to have to absorb payroll taxes for? Maybe put them on into the health plan or enroll them in your retirement plan where you by policy offering them free money, 1%, 2%, 3% match to their 401k. It's very expensive to hire a new person. And if this one expense is too much for you to absorb, the price of energy, then you're hardly in a position to hire more people. Now, the big reason that unemployment has not jumped is because fewer people are actually looking for jobs. The rate is pretty stable. It's like 4 or 4.3%, but you've got boomers who are retiring. They're reaching that retirement age. And then younger people who are just not looking anymore. And they're not looking anymore because 1 in 4 people who are looking for jobs have been looking for over 6 months. That's a long time to go without. That's a lot of frustration. And people are just saying, I guess it's just not in the cards for me. All right. I want to pivot over to another thing, because this is not our current administration's fault, but it is relevant to where we exist today, because this is legal and this was done to you, the American people, by the Biden auto pen administration that said you've never had it better. Now, one of the biggest expenses and one of the biggest affordability matters right now is related to housing, because housing prices are hugely overpriced, because we exist in a time, or have existed in a time, where interest rates were kept artificially low. It was very easy, very cheap to borrow money, so people were doing that. And then we had different populations moving from one end to the other of the country because they said, I live in California, and you're telling me that I got to wear a mask in the shower, and I ain't down for that, so I'm going to move to Florida. Same thing if you're in New York and you want to move to Texas. There's this huge population move. So people came and were buying houses, and there's a supply and demand matter. A lot of people buying houses meant that the prices went up. Also, the money that they're using to buy the houses is not worth that much because of the inflation matters here. So it was cheap to borrow and prices were skyrocketing. Now, what did the Biden administration do to make the problem worse for the American people who they did not have a pulse on, did not feel what they were feeling? Well, one of the ways that you can get a loan is with the Federal Housing Administration, FHA. Wouldn't recommend it. It's designed to put poor people in houses because the government has deemed that somewhere in the invisible ink on the back of the Declaration of Independence, called the Good and Plenty Clause, that poor people deserve a house. Again, dealing with things that are not within their purview, not within their prime directive, not part of our social compact. And this is the lay of the land, the battlefield conditions that we exist in. FHA loans. They tend to be higher interest. So you're going to put poor people into a house and then have them have a higher housing payment than regular people because they shouldn't have been in to begin with. Again, not really doing any long-term thinking, but it plays really well. You can get voted into office if you promise to give poor people access to housing. And I saw a couple of posts online about this because this went on during the Biden administration, and it pertains not to Americans, but to foreigners. H-1B, B as in Bravo, visa holders, people from foreign lands who come to the United States, get a visa in order to have a job. And they were given special goodies. Financing options for H-1B holders. Bloomfield Homes preferred lenders such as Donnie Walton and Janet Pruitt provide programs that typically allow H-1B holders to secure financing with competitive terms. Now, FHA loans for foreigners. People were getting somewhere in the area of 97 to 100% financing. A foreigner, not an American, rolls up, gets a government-backed loan to buy a house. Have you tried to get a mortgage as a regular American? You normally got to bring in a certain amount, or you have to pay extra. You have to bring in 10 to 20% down payment. House is worth $200,000. I mean, she's probably not relevant today, but let's make it more appropriate. Let's say the house is worth $1 million. You have to bring in $200,000 down cash. Not if you're a foreigner. Not if it's during the Biden auto pen administration. No, you only had to bring in $30,000. And actually, the $30,000 that we can make up that because the states will kick in 30 grand. You have to bring in nothing. You get to have a house, and you get to have a house. And it was going on not nationwide, but sort of in these clusters where take it like the Dallas-Fort Worth area where they were bringing in a whole bunch of people from India to work in tech. And all these people that were coming from India to the Dallas-Fort Worth area were buying houses and competing against Americans, not just for the jobs, but for the houses, and bidding the houses up to a point where it was 6%, which is like 1 in 15, 1 in 16 houses were purchased using this mechanism. And now it's been ended by the Trump administration. But everything that happened at that time was completely legal. These loans were legally obtained prior to May of 2025. It was ended during the Trump Part 2 administration a couple months in. But again, look at the competition. The competition, not just for the jobs that you're being outbidded for, because somebody from India comes here and they're willing to take less money because they deem that to be an acceptable pay rate for what that job is, because they're not hip to how much things cost in America yet. And let's compete now for houses. American wants to buy a $500,000 house. Well, you're going to have to bring in like 100 grand. What's the Indian going to at that case? So they'll have to bring in like 15 grand at most. Mostly it's going to be covered $0. So people were outbid for all of this stuff. And again, I have a visual to show just the shock to the system. If you happen to be listening to us over on Spotify, guys, this is the time to click on over. We're like 38 minutes into the program. You can see the share of the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, mortgage locks, non-permanent residents from 2018 to 2026, the giant spike that happened and then ended abruptly during the current administration when they said, no, we're not going to give advantageous loans to foreigners anymore, because we relatively have our finger on the pulse of this and we feel the people's pain when it comes to the housing costs. I wish that sort of feeling, that sort of empathy could be applied to other things when it comes to paring back the government expenditures that are causing the inflation and causing the necessity to bring up interest rates, all this stuff. Because there was a populist. There was people in the room, at least with the president, saying, hey, people are hurting here. We need to do something with that within the very limited confines of what our role and responsibilities are as the Article 2 branch, as the executive branch. And they did it with that. They said, no, we're not doing that. That's not even our job anymore. Let's just cut it. Hey, good job. Amen. Why don't you do that with everything else? All right. Let's talk about some illegal alien stuff with the Democrats. But before we do, guys, I alluded to the Spotify account. I want to give you your one time per show reminder right now. If you haven't already, give us a nice thumbs up, follow, subscribe on Rumble and YouTube at AmRadPod. And if you would mind, also head on over to Spotify where you can give us a follow there. Again, at AmRadPod. And I will try to insert the commercial to go for right now. And we can move on to the next story that I have, because I've been hammering down on the Trump administration, the Republicans so much today. Let's get a greater understanding of the adversary. let's get a greater understanding of those communists, of why they love illegal aliens so much. And I saw this an opinion piece from Mark Thiessen over at Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. I think Mark Thiessen was one of these guys who was debanked during the Biden administration. I have to dig into that one. But the headline, why won't Democrats moderate on immigration? Here's a clue. And I want to connect it to the housing that we just discussed. So right now, Democrats are losing the redistricting battle, which we haven't really talked about a whole bunch because all these different states are trying to gerrymander the territories for each of the congressional districts. And the blue states are fighting the red states, and the red states are trying to get more Republicans, and the blue states are trying to get more Democrats elected. If anything, just as a intellectual exercise, we founded the country, and the Congress, the House of Representatives, were supposed to be directly democratically elected by the people, responsive to the people. And then the Senate was supposed to come out of the states, the state assemblies. So they were going to be more responsive to the states. But then, because the communists started to take over and they called themselves progressives, they reoriented our government so that we democratically elected senators. So it just basically became all responsive to the people. And now we have a very divided government. It's like 51-49 all the time. Whereas if our Senate was coming from the state houses, you'd have a super majority on the Republican side that'd be responsive to the states, and you'd probably be able to push forward a more conservative agenda. But from the intellectual side of things, we're responsive to the people from the Senate. I guess if the states are redrawing the House of Representative districts, that's going to the state houses. So maybe we're going to make the House of Representatives more responsive to the states, which might give us a little bit of balance, but it seems like we're kind of all out of whack. Going to have to noodle that one out a little bit more. But for this piece from Mark Thiessen on why Democrats won't moderate on illegal aliens. So you got these states. They're all fighting about how they're going to gerrymander to get their people into position at a federal level. We've had some population shifts. People moving from California, New York, Illinois, and they're going to places like Florida and Texas and Tennessee. As long as they don't bring their politics with them, all good. But as it stands right now, blue states are projected to lose 10 electoral votes. That means that the Republicans, in order to win a presidential election, don't have to break through the, quote, blue wall. What was that? It was Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They had to win one of those states, right? They had to hold serve in all these toss-up states. But if you swing a whole bunch of electoral votes from New York, Illinois, and California, you shave those off and you now re-award them to Texas and Florida and Tennessee. Well, now the Republicans aren't going to have to do that anymore. They're not going to have to even campaign to win in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. They can just go to the heavily red areas. There's enough votes there. There's enough points through the Electoral College in order to win. Now, Democrats are hoping that the blue state resistance to deportations, making themselves sanctuaries, is going to be a bulwark. Why? Because the way that we give representatives, the way that we apportion representation in this country is not related to the number of citizens. Just blows my mind. It is on total people living in a state. So California gets to count the number of illegal aliens living in California when they say, hey, this is how many representatives we're supposed to have due to our population, not our population of citizens, total population. That's why blue states want to have sanctuary. They're being rewarded with further representation at the Congress and being rewarded with more of a say in the election of the president via the Electoral College because they get to have illegal aliens counted in that. And on top of that, states like my state, the land of milk and honey, that is Florida, where woke and weaponization and winter go to die. We're big on deporting illegal aliens. So in effect, we're actually hurting ourselves when it comes to getting more representatives here. If we didn't deport the illegal aliens, then we would have more of a say in the Electoral College, more of a say in the House of Representatives. We'd have more representatives here. And that leads me to the final point that I have on this particular piece. What's the odds that if and when, and heavily emphasis on the when, the midterms go the direction of the Democrats this time around. And that's just the ebb and flow of politics. That typically is what happens. And particularly when the president of the United States says he doesn't care about the American people, I don't think that you're looking into the future very far before there's a giant pendulum swing back to the other side. What are the odds that Republicans say, now, we maybe have to make a deal here on illegal alien deportation? So we're not going to declare amnesty, but what if we just stop the crackdown and we can ensure that we have greater populations that includes illegal aliens in places like Texas and Florida and Tennessee by theoretically ejecting those illegal aliens from the country? We're hurting ourselves here. So we'll get a quasi amnesty so that the Republicans can make the case that they're just doing it in order to push back on those sanctuary policies within the blue states. We'll effectively have sanctuary in all states, and it'll be done for political purposes, for electoral purposes, which is not a healthy way to run a republic. But then again, this was an alleged land of the free, and I don't think that we're anywhere close to that right now, which is a good place to leave it for our last story of the day, which comes from Gateway Pundit, which makes the case that the Department of Justice does not like the First Amendment, and I have to agree with their assessment. So Gateway Pundit, which has some of the longest headlines, guys, apologies for this. It's difficult to read all the way through, but we'll try nonetheless. Headline: we voted for Trump. We got a Kamala Harris DOJ. The Michael Castellero case exposes that little has changed at the SDNY, which stands for Southern District of New York, and Todd Blanche either doesn't know or doesn't care. Again, a very long headline. It comes from Jonathan Gross, though, who's a pretty good dude. He's actually been a guest on this program before. He was one of the defense attorneys for J6ers. He got brought into the Department of Justice, and then they effectively ran him out of there because the institution is forever. Preserving the status quo is everything. But Jonathan points out here, Michael Castellero, he was indicted in 2023. If you don't know it, don't really worry about it. He basically had this extra fee that he didn't disclose to his investors. He ran some investment fund and he didn't disclose that he had a fee. He argued, hey, everybody made money. And the government said, well, they would have made more money. So is he a little bit of a fraudster? I don't know. Maybe. I don't really dig too much into that. But he is the canary in the coal mine of a First Amendment case, not a white collar case, not a fraud case, but a First Amendment. So Castellero gets indicted 2023. Biden administration, he's a Trump donor. He's a big Trump guy. He posted some memes online about stolen elections. He's been to Mar-a-Lago, and he was there when Donald Trump announced he was going to run for president in 2024. So he's an acolyte. He's a big Trump guy. You would think he'd be kind of on the short list for some kind of commutation, or at least calling the dogs off of the Department of Justice. But that's not happening. So he gets convicted. He's going to prison, barring some sort of commutation pardoning. But he hasn't gone yet. There's the weird thing. I mean, with white collar stuff, it's not unusual for them to give you like a report by date. All right, you've been convicted, you've been sentenced, you have to do 18 months in prison. You need to report by June 1st, anytime between now and then. And people will wait to the last minute and then they'll report a couple minutes before. Maybe they go ahead and do it now because it's more convenient, one thing or another. Like, I got to go for 6 months. And the kids are going to be out of school this summer. So, you're not going to have to worry about driving them to school for as long. So I'll just go now. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been convicted of a federal crime, but I imagine that those sorts of considerations go into it. But the Department of Justice right now, having got their win, is still fighting. What are they fighting? Well, Castellero has gone on the podcasting circuit. He's arguing his case. He's saying, hey, look, this was weaponization. I was persecuted because of my political beliefs. And the judge was biased against me. The judge was some Obama appointee. And this is what the DOJ is now arguing. They're saying that he made statements that are lies and that he should be punished more. It should enhance his sentence in prison. Here are the bullet points. He was politically targeted because of his support for Donald Trump. That's an opinion. He said that the investigators built a case out of nothing. Again, that's an opinion. His investors were not actually harmed. He spent millions of dollars on lawyers, and the judge showed bias against him. All First Amendment protected activity. No threats, nothing at all. malinformation. Oh, that's where it is. It's that whole malinformation thing. Things that might be true, but are just inconvenient. So here's the quote from the Department of Justice in a letter to the judge asking for an enhanced sentence because we no longer live in the alleged land of the free where you have a First Amendment right to speak your opinion. Quote, Castellero has stated that he was targeted by the Securities and Exchange Commission and by this office because of his political beliefs and affinity for President Trump. These statements are false. So we're going to make an allegation, an objective statement of fact that those allegations are false. Did he say they were true? I mean, they might be true. They might not be. I think they probably are. But again, I'm asserting an opinion, as was Mr. Castellero. But the Department of Justice, via the Southern District of New York, said that he said things that were dis, or malinformation. They're lies. And you should take us, the government, judge, the government who investigates the government all the time and determines that the government did nothing wrong. We are going to be the arbiter of what is true and what is not. And he is saying something that is factually inaccurate. He should go to prison for longer. Now, I thought we elected a president who was the most famous example of weaponized government. He was indicted with 91 felonies. Did he not have his finger on the pulse of that? How is this sort of thing continuing to exist in our present government, which is run at the helm of the executive branch by Donald Trump? I think he's lost his fastball a little bit intellectually with his speaking patterns and certainly with his relationship to the huddled masses yearning to be free, to the voters, the people who installed Donald Trump to become our 47th president in November of 2024. Populism. Responsiveness. Lick that finger, put it in the wind, and see where the people want you to be. And you put yourself there. That's just smart politics. And yet, he's still sitting there. And he's saying, you're an idiot. I don't care about you. And what are we going to get? Well, we're going to get a Kamala Harris-style Department of Justice. We're going to get a Kamala Harris-style Congress. But ultimately, is it going to be much different than we have now? We point it out all the time here. The system seems to be forever. The status quo is undefeated, and we're all far worse off for it. All right. So we've reached the end of the AM Rad Pod for today, which is a Tuesday. Again, reminder, guys, I'm going to be on Timcast this evening, 8 o'clock. So be sure to tune in there if you want to see more of moi. We'll have to miss tomorrow's episode. And Thursday, I guess, will be our aim for the next AM Rad Pod. But I'm going to have to leave you with an awesome palate cleanse then. Maybe one that's good for 2 shows worth. And I think I found one. This is the best male model ever. Not related to anything, just really fun. Sort of makes me think that maybe I'll get discovered for a Calvin Klein contract tonight on Timcast. I don't know. Hope springs eternal. Okay, guys. Thank you as always for joining us on the American Radicals podcast. If you haven't already, do all those things. Like, follow, subscribe. We'll plan to be back with you Thursday, noontime Eastern. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.